Hello, thank you for listening. My name is Klaus Richter, and I want to tell you a story from a time when I was just 32 years old. A lifetime ago, and yet it feels like yesterday. Before the war, my world was orderly. It smelled of wet cobblestones after a summer rain, of ink drying on a freshly filed report. I was a criminalpolizist in Dresden, a policeman. My life was governed by procedure, by the quiet satisfaction of finding a fact, a piece of evidence, and fitting it into its rightful place until a picture emerged from the chaos. I believed with the foolish certainty of a man who has only ever known peace that every problem had a solution. Every crime had a perpetrator, and every perpetrator would eventually answer to the law. The law was a great, intricate machine. Sometimes slow, sometimes frustrating, but always turning. Justice was inevitable. The war taught me that some machines are designed only to break things, including the men who serve them. People ask me now what it was like at the end, in that final, furious spring of '45. They expect stories of grand battles, of ideology, of a heroic last stand for the fatherland. But for me, in the mud and the smoke of the Seelow Heights, it wasn't about any of that. It was about the collapse of everything I had ever understood. And it began, as all my stories once did, with the discovery of a body. The world had shrunk to the space between the collar of my tunic and the rim of my helmet. April 1945. The air itself was a living thing, a rasping beast made of cordite, churned earth, and the sweet, cloying smell of death that had long ago stopped bothering us. It was the background noise to our lives. The ground beneath my boots was never still. It shivered constantly from the percussion of Stalin's organs firing from beyond the odor. A drumbeat for the end of the world. I was with the 9th Fallschirmjäger. A proud name for a ragged collection of men who hadn't seen the inside of a transport plane in years. We were just infantry now. Hardened, yes, but worn smooth by years of retreat. We were ghosts haunting the corpse of our own country. Beside me was Becker, my sergeant, a man whose face was a road map of the Eastern Front, all deep lines and craters. And there were the boys' children, really. Volkssturm. Their eyes were too wide, and their hands trembled as they tried to light cigarettes with the same desperate intensity they applied to aiming their Panzerfausts. Our orders were simple: fall back, dig in, delay. Bleed for every meter of German soil. We were to secure a small village, a place whose name I have long since forgotten. It was just another collection of broken teeth on the jawbone of the front line. We moved through the gray dawn, wraiths in Feldgrau. The village was supposed to have been evacuated, a ghost town waiting for the red tide, but something felt wrong. My old instincts, the policeman's instincts I thought had been shelled out of me long ago, began to prickle at the back of my neck. It was the silence, not the absence of noise. The artillery was a constant companion, but the absence of life. It was a dead quiet, a crime scene quiet. I remembered walking into a home in Dresden once, a burglary case. The air was thick with the same violation, the same sense of a sudden, violent departure. My mind, a traitor, flashed an image, the smell of lilac from a window box on that street, the comforting weight of my pistol on my hip, a tool of order. A shell screamed overhead, the sound tearing the memory to shreds. I slammed against the wall of a half-destroyed bakery, brick dust filling my mouth. Lilacs were a world away. Becker barked orders, sending squads to clear the houses. Richter, take the 2 kids, check that farmstead at the end of the lane, make sure it's empty. No surprises for Ivan. I nodded, my throat too dry to speak. The 2 boys, no older than 16, followed me like shadows. We moved carefully, our boots crunching on shattered roof tiles. The farmhouse was wrong. The main gate was splintered but kicked inwards, not blown apart. A woman's scarf, a fine silk one, was snagged on a splinter of wood, fluttering like a captured bird. Not something you leave behind when evacuating according to orders. It's something you drop when you run. We cleared the house first. Empty tables overturned, drawers pulled out. A frantic, ugly search. This wasn't the methodical plundering of an advancing army. This was hasty, greedy, desperate. In the main room, a family photograph was on the floor, the glass cracked. A man, a woman, 2 children, smiling in a world that no longer existed. One of the boys with me, a blond kid named Erich, nudged it with his boot. I snapped at him. Leave it. The policeman in me was taking notes. The soldier was screaming that we were wasting time. The barn was next. The large wooden doors were slightly ajar. I pushed one open. The smell hit me first, not the familiar farm smells of hay and manure. It was Schnapp's sour sweat and the iron-rich scent of a slaughterhouse. My stomach tightened. I motioned for the boys to stay back and slipped inside, my car 98K held tight against my shoulder. And there it was, my case file. My report, the cellar door was open. a dark, square mouth in the dirt floor. I knew, with the cold certainty of 1,000 investigations, what I would find down there. I took a deep breath, the air tasting of grit and foreboding, and descended the stone steps. They were huddled in the far corner. An old man, his face a mask of surprise, a small, dark hole in his chest. A woman, perhaps his daughter, lay over him, her back torn apart by a burst of machine pistol fire. And beside them, half hidden by her mother's body, was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 10. Her eyes were wide open, staring at the damp stone ceiling. There was no blood on her. Just a stillness that was more violent than any wound. My training took over, a ghost moving my limbs. I knelt. The soldier in me scanned for threats. The policeman saw the evidence. The shell casings on the floor were brassy and new. 7.92 Mauser, our ammunition, and 9 Parabellum MP40 standard issue. This wasn't the work of the Soviets. This was ours. This was us. My thoughts were stripped gears, grinding uselessly. Why? They were German civilians, old men, women, children, the very people we were supposed to be dying for. Against the wall, I saw it. A half-empty bottle of Steinheger. A dirty field cap from a Heer unit, not our Fallschirmjäger green-gray. And next to it, tucked under some straw, a soldier's paybook, a sold butch. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The cover was worn, stained with something dark. I opened it. A name, a unit, a face staring blankly from a small photograph. He was just a boy, younger than me. He looked tired. I had seen his face 1,000 times on 1,000 men, the face of Germany in 1945. This was the perpetrator, or one of them. The evidence was here. Motive. A dispute over food, valuables, a drunken rage. It didn't matter. The crime was absolute. Murder. My entire being, the policeman I once was, screamed in a silent agony. A report must be made. Justice must be served. The machine must turn. Then reality crashed back in. The thunder of an approaching tank, its tracks chewing up the road to the village. The shouts of Sergeant Becker from outside. Richter, what is it? Get out here. Contact. Contact the enemy. The real enemy was minutes away. What was I going to do? Run to Becker, waving this paybook, tell him that somewhere in our retreating army there were men murdering German families. He would laugh, or he would shoot me. He was a pragmatist. We were losing a war. 3 dead civilians were less than a statistic. They were a rounding error in the final calculation of our nation's death. To report this would be suicide. It would be seen as defeatism, as an attempt to undermine morale. I would be put against a wall and shot, and this boy in the paybook would go on fighting and dying and killing, but to do nothing. To leave this cellar, to seal this crime scene with silence, that felt like a different kind of death. It was the death of Klaus Richter, the policeman from Dresden. It was the surrender of the last piece of myself that wasn't just a uniform and a rifle. The roar of the tank was louder now. The floor vibrated. Dust trickled from the ceiling onto the face of the dead girl. I made a choice, not between right and wrong. There was no right left in the world. I chose between 2 different kinds of broken. I shoved the paybook inside my tunic. The stiff cardboard pressed against my ribs like a shard of glass. I took one last look at the family, a silent apology lodged in my throat like a stone. Then I turned and ran up the stairs, back into the war, leaving the truth buried in the dark. Becker was at the barn door, his face grim. What did you find? I looked him in the eye, the lie already formed, tasting like ash. Nothing, Sergeant, just rats. The cellar's empty. I spent years after the war trying to put things back together. My city was gone, my profession was gone, but I tried. I learned a new trade. I raised a family. But that policeman from Dresden, he never truly came home from the war. He died in that cellar. I learned that day that the law is a fragile thing, a beautiful, intricate clockwork built for a quiet room. But when the house is on fire, the gears melt, the springs snap, and you cannot prosecute a fire. People talk about the great evils of the war, the monsters in the history books, but I saw the true horror in that cellar. It wasn't an enemy uniform. It was a familiar one. It was the realization of what happens when ordinary men are pushed so far past breaking that they forget the rules of being men. The most dangerous thing in the world is not a man with a bad idea, but a man with no ideas left at all, except to survive one more minute. That is the true face of anarchy, and it looks just like your neighbor. I kept that paybook for 50 years. It's a small, heavy thing, the evidence of a crime that was never reported, for a victim who was never named, committed by a boy who was likely killed a few days later. It's a piece of a story. This memory is just like it. It's heavy. Help me carry it. Subscribe and ensure these stories are never left to rust in silence.